Welcome to a deep dive into Daniel. I know you requested this one, so thanks for reaching out. You wanted an overview, so I think we can hit all the major themes and key events today. And this book is it's amazing. We're talking ancient Babylon, kings and prophecies, some wild dreams, and some real courage in the face of, well, some really intense pressure.
It's a story that never gets old, and it's really relevant even today.
Exactly. To set the stage, we're in the 6th century BCE. The Babylonian Empire has conquered Judah, taken many of the Jews into exile, and that includes Daniel. Can you imagine that? Being taken from your homeland, and now you have to live in a totally foreign culture with different gods, different ways of life.
Yeah, it would have been disorienting. Not just physical captivity, but also, cultural and religious pressure to assimilate.
And that's where Daniel's story begins. He and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they're given Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they're chosen for this elite training program in the Babylonian court. I mean, talk about being thrown into the lion's den right away.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? It's more than just training. It's an intentional way to mold them, make them loyal Babylonian subjects, essentially try to erase their Jewish identity.
You're right. So that leads us to the first big challenge, the food. Daniel refuses to eat the king's food because it goes against Jewish dietary laws. What does that tell us about Daniel?
Well, I think it shows real commitment to his faith,
Yeah.
a willingness to stand up for what he believes in, even if it seems like a small thing. It's subtle, but it's a powerful act of resistance. It's saying, I will not compromise who I am, even in this, seemingly minor detail.
It's a big statement, and it really sets the tone for everything that follows.
Right.
But he doesn't just refuse. He proposes a test, a 10-day experiment with a vegetarian diet. And guess what? Daniel and his friends end up looking healthier than everyone else.
Like a science experiment. And it has those 2 outcomes, First, Daniel is smart, he's strategic. But the second, and maybe the more important one, God's favor is on those who are obedient to him.
And God doesn't just keep them healthy. He blesses them with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. They're at the top of their class. So Daniel stands up for his beliefs, but he's also incredibly gifted.
Which takes us to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. He has this really disturbing dream, but can't remember it. But he demands that his wise men, and that includes Daniel, tell him both the dream and the interpretation.
It's kind of funny, right? You're a wise man. Okay, well, prove it. Read my mind.
Exactly. And it's life or death, right? If they fail, it's over. But it's not really just about the dream, is it? I mean, what's Nebuchadnezzar really trying to do?
It's about control, isn't it? Authority. It's a test, almost like he's saying, my God's there is stronger than yours.
A showdown between the God of Israel and the gods of Babylon.
Right. Everyone's freaking out. But Daniel, he doesn't panic. He asks for time to pray, and God answers in a big way. God reveals both the dream and the interpretation. So not only does Daniel save everyone, but he also shows the power of the one true God.
Pivotal moment, and the dream is fascinating. It's this giant statue made of different metals, and these metals, they represent different kingdoms rising and falling.
Wow, yeah, like a sneak peek into the future of empires.
Mm-hmm.
And Daniel's interpretation, it's a prophecy. The Babylonian Empire, it's the head of gold, but then it's going to be replaced by other kingdoms, not as good, not as strong. And eventually, God's kingdom will come, and it will crush all the others, and it will last forever.
A powerful message about God's sovereignty, isn't it? Even the biggest empires, they're subject to his plan. And that image of the statue's value declining from gold to silver, then bronze, then iron, I mean, what do you think that means?
It's like a commentary on how power works.
Yeah.
Empires rise and fall, and ones that come after, they're often weaker. It makes you wonder, what is true power? Is it military might, or is it something else, something more lasting?
That's a question we see a lot in Daniel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Daniel, he's promoted to a high position. His friends get important roles. God's faithfulness is clear. But, well, their challenges aren't over. This is just the beginning. So he left off with Daniel and his friends. They're doing well in the Babylonian court, but, with great power comes great challenges, right?
For their friends.
And their faith, it's about to be tested big time.
Oh, yeah. Things get really intense when Nebuchadnezzar, he wants to make a statement. A huge statement about his power.
Right. He builds this massive golden statue, and he says, everyone, no matter what you believe, you have to bow down and worship it. It's like, talk about a power grab.
A classic example of a ruler demanding obedience and using religion to back it up. You see this all the time throughout history.
All the time. So it's a clash, loyalty to God versus obedience to the state. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, well, they refuse to bow. Their faith just won't let them compromise.
It's not just that they say no, it's how they say it. They put their trust in God, even if it means death. It's powerful, real faith.
They tell Nebuchadnezzar, "Our God, the one we serve, he can deliver us from this fiery furnace. And he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But even if he doesn't, we will not serve your gods. We will not worship this gold image you've set up."
That is courage.
Oh, yeah. So Nebuchadnezzar, he is furious. He orders them thrown into this blazing furnace, and he makes it 7 times hotter than usual, to really make a point, like, don't mess with me.
It's become such an iconic scene, right? Those 3 standing strong while the flames are all around them, a symbol of resistance against tyranny.
And then, well, it's incredible. Nebuchadnezzar, he looks into the furnace. He expects to see, ashes.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, there are 4 figures walking around totally unharmed.
Right.
And the 4th one, it looks like a son of God.
It's a miracle. God's power, even in this extreme situation. And that description of the 4th figure, it makes you think, doesn't it? About God, about his presence when we suffer.
Totally adds to the mystery. And Nebuchadnezzar, he's stunned. He acknowledges their God. He releases them, even promotes them.
It reminds you that even the worst situations, God can use them for his glory. And it's a turning point for Nebuchadnezzar, isn't it? This encounter with the God of Israel, it really affects him.
You see that in the next chapter. Nebuchadnezzar has another dream. This time, it's about a tree, a mighty tree being cut down, but the stump, it's preserved. And he's really bothered by this dream.
This time he remembers the dream, but he still doesn't understand it. And he goes back to Daniel for the interpretation.
Which is interesting, right? After everything that's happened, he still doesn't fully get it. He still relies on his Babylonian wise men, even though they failed him before.
It shows you how tough it is to let go of pride, to change your way of thinking, even when it's proven wrong.
Yeah. He's learned something, but not enough. And Daniel, he's honest. He tells Nebuchadnezzar that the tree, it represents him. The dream is a warning. God is going to humble him, take away his power, his glory, and he'll be left in a state of madness.
That's a tough message to deliver, especially to the king. Daniel knows it could be dangerous, but he has to obey God, not just say what the king wants to hear.
And Nebuchadnezzar, he doesn't listen. He stays proud and arrogant, and the dream comes true. He loses his mind. He lives like an animal in the fields for 7 years. His hair and nails grow long. It's pretty intense.
A powerful reminder, right? Even the most powerful rulers, they answer to God. Power doesn't last forever. Pride comes before the fall.
But there's more to the story. After those 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar's mind is restored. He comes back to his throne. And now he acknowledges God. He praises God, saying his dominion is everlasting. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. It's an amazing change.
That's God's mercy and grace, right? Even in judgment, there's a chance for redemption. And it goes back to that key theme in Daniel, being humble before God.
True power, not from conquering or empires, but from submitting to God.
And then we move on to the next chapter, a new king, Belshazzar. He doesn't seem to learn anything from what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He throws this huge feast and he uses the sacred vessels, the ones stolen from the temple in Jerusalem. It's like he's going out of his way to disrespect God.
Like he's provoking God on purpose, yeah.
And at this feast, a hand appears out of nowhere and writes on the wall. Everyone is terrified. Belshazzar calls for his wise men, but they have no idea what it means.
It's like straight out of a horror movie. A disembodied hand writing a message no one can understand.
It shows how limited human wisdom is, right? They have all their knowledge, their expertise, but they can't figure out this message from God.
So they call Daniel, and he tells it like it is. He says the handwriting is God's judgment on Belshazzar. He says Babylon is about to fall.
And he's saying all this right to the king's face. Belshazzar, he's surrounded by his court, seems super powerful. But Daniel, he stands there and says, "Your kingdom is finished."
Wow, that takes guts to speak the truth, especially when it's bad news. But Daniel, he always delivers God's message no matter what.
And that night, it happens. Belshazzar is killed. Babylon is conquered by the Medes and Persians. Exactly what Daniel said would happen.
Wow. Even the strongest empires, they can fall. God's plan, it always wins. And so we move to the next chapter. Daniel is serving yet another king, Darius the Mede. And again, his faithfulness and integrity, they lead to both challenges and rewards. We'll get into that in the next part of our deep dive. Back to Daniel. We've seen him interpret dreams, stand up to kings, come through some crazy situations, and all the while staying faithful to God.
And now we get to his visions, his prophecies. It's like a glimpse into the future, God's plan for the world.
Yeah, and those visions, they can be a little tough to understand, all the symbolism, the imagery, but the main thing is God is in control. His plan, it's going to work out no matter how messed up things seem right now.
Exactly. And you see this idea over and over that history isn't just random, it's all part of God's plan.
So Daniel chapter 8, he sees a ram with 2 horns. It represents the kings of Media and Persia. The ram is charging around, conquering, showing its power.
And then this goat with a big horn, that's the king of Greece, and it takes down the ram. The rise of the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, taking over from the Medo-Persians.
It's wild how these visions match up with history. It's like Daniel seeing the future hundreds of years before it happens. But that goat's horn, it breaks, and 4 smaller horns come out, representing how Alexander's empire splits up after he dies.
And that's exactly what happened, right? History shows that Alexander's empire was divided, 4 Hellenistic kingdoms.
It's like a prophecy playing out in real time. Then, from one of those little horns, a new horn grows big and powerful. It starts causing destruction, even attacks the prince of the army and the sanctuary.
That little horn, it's really important. It's a ruler who will come later, oppose God, do terrible things to the temple, and persecute God's people. A lot of people think this points to Antiochus V Epiphanes, a Seleucid king, really brutal to the Jews in the 2nd century BCE.
A reminder that even when empires fall, there are always new threats to God's people. But Daniel learns this persecution won't last. The sanctuary will be put right again after a certain time, 2,300 evenings and mornings.
A time prophecy, a lot of different interpretations, but the point is, God has a timetable. Even when things are bad, there's a promise of restoration, vindication.
God is always working, even when we can't see it. And now, Daniel's final vision, chapters 10 through 12, angels, spiritual battles, the end times.
It's both amazing and scary, This cosmic battle happening behind the scenes of everything we see.
Daniel is by the Tigris River, and he sees this incredible being clothed in linen, a golden belt. The angel Gabriel coming with a message about what's to come.
And Daniel is just overwhelmed by this angel, falls into a trance, shows you the power of this message, right?
Gabriel says there'll be conflicts, kings and kingdoms fighting, especially between the king of the north and the king of the south. Yeah. Different empires and rulers battling it out.
Like a historical drama. Battles, alliances, betrayals, power struggles, all on a global scale. But it's more than just politics, right? It's part of this bigger spiritual conflict.
Oh, yeah. Gabriel says he was held up by the prince of the kingdom of Persia, and soon he'll have to face the prince of Greece. It's like there's this whole other reality, spiritual beings fighting for control over what happens here on earth.
Spiritual warfare adds a whole other level to these visions. It's like what we see in the world is just a reflection of these deeper spiritual battles.
And then Gabriel describes this king who will come in the future, exalt and magnify himself above every deity, and speak presumptuous things against the God of gods.
This figure, sometimes called the Antichrist, he's like the ultimate rebel against God, and he's going to cause a lot of suffering, persecute those who stay faithful to God.
It's a reminder, following God isn't always easy. There will be tough times, dark times. But even with all that, there's hope. Gabriel says that Michael, the great prince, will rise up to protect God's people.
Michael, the protector, the warrior. It shows you God is involved. He defends those who are faithful. He's not just watching, he's fighting for them.
And Daniel sees the end times, the dead rising, the final judgment. The righteous, they'll shine like the brightness of the heavens, and the wicked, they'll face punishment that never ends.
Good wins over evil, that's the message. And it makes you think about the choices you make, right? They matter, not just for now, but forever.
The book of Daniel, it's not just old stories. It's a message of hope, of standing strong. It reminds us that God is in control. His plan will win in the end.
Be courageous, live with integrity, stand strong in your faith, even when it's hard. God is with you, he's fighting for you, he's guiding you to his victory.
It's been amazing exploring Daniel with you. As we finish this deep dive, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, remember, being truly faithful, it can be costly. But even in the trials, the persecution, God is there for those who trust him.
And God's plan, it's so much bigger than we can grasp. Even when things are crazy, he's working to bring about his purposes.
And those visions, they give us hope. Even when things are dark, God is sovereign. His kingdom will win.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Daniel. We hope you'll keep exploring your faith, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.